probably know that by heart.
I'm not military. Do we expect anybody else? I know John Gallo won't be here. I don't think Greg's coming, right?
Correct.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We start the finance committee meeting. Welcome to the hall. Unless you like to do roll call.
Keith Dirk,
Here.
Sean Moll,
Here.
John Gallen will be absent, Craig Portner will be absent, and Steve Brunner.
Here. Okay. Moving on, any public comment?
Yes, just a few words. Regret Mr. Brennan is not here. I just wanted to thank him for giving me a nice, decent reply to an email. So I'm waiting on that. I don't know. I wanted to see.
Is this finance related? Can we get?
It's administration.
Okay, let's get to the
Yeah.
point.
Today I just want to say a few words about the accident that happened earlier this year, which resulted in the death of a worker on borough property. As best I understand, it was a confined space entry in a pit with purpose to change a meter readout. So my questions are, why wasn't the borough representative present to ensure that proper confined space entry procedures are followed? Jim Babb was one who asked for this remote reader to be installed. Why wasn't he present at the job site? Issued permits, whatever. Was there a permit issued by the borough for the confined space entry? Was there a line break permit issued? And was this work performed with, why was this work performed with the line under pressure? There have been several meetings since then, and as usual, the council and management are silent and act as nobody did anything wrong, and this is not a big deal. Jim Babb is notoriously not present, whatever he apparently needs to be. We've alerted him about our snow removal issues for years, but he took no action. When my wife called him, he hung up on her. When a tree fell down on the street, he also took no action, left it there over the entire weekend simply because it was Good Friday and he did not feel like working that afternoon. Anyway, I had a further comment here. I will stop here. So I think we need to look at these issues thoroughly, and I don't see how when a work like this is performed by any contractor, whatever that is, with that amount of risk, that no representative from the borough is present there. And I've been a plant engineer. I know what a confined space entry is. I have been trained in confined space entry. These are things that we are trained for. Exactly what happened there. So, who is in charge? Why aren't these people, held accountable? Because this is a problem of supervision, not a worker problem. If a guy dies on my watch as a plant engineer, I'm the one responsible for his life. You can always blame the victim. Oh, he didn't do this, or something happened. No, you have to shut down the pressure, relieve the pressure, shut down the line, and then you put the guy get into the confined space entry. This is murder.
Michelle, correct. It's Western Berks water, right? They own the pit.
Correct.
They own the pit. They own the line, and it was their.
It's not our property.
No.
No.
It's owned
And
by
it's a
Western
government
Berks.
agency.
It's owned by
It's not
Western
an
Berks
outside
Water,
contractor.
who was there, who took
Okay.
care of the situation, and it's still under litigation. So I don't think the borough's going to be able to talk any more about it. But it's not ours. We have no business there. We're not allowed to be there. We can be there as a
Well, that's
Wyomissing
fair
because it's
enough.
on our street,
my-
but it's not our pit. It's not our line. It's not our workers.
I understand.
Okay.
Fair enough.
And under PUC regulations, utilities are exempt from obtaining permits for that type of work.
Well, that was fun.
I'd like to make a public comment.
Please
If
do.
I could. Just for the record, I don't know if you know this, Mr. J, but that young man that got killed was my wife's nephew.
Alright, Rick? Yeah,
But
sorry.
in any event, I hated Zoom meetings for the last year and a half. And, except for the fact that, you know, I have a place on the Chesapeake Bay, and it would be nice if we could have the technology to, I want to get to as many meetings in person as I can, but I know, you know, Keith Durr and Steve Brunner, who happen to be sitting right here, they have beach properties. I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't want anybody to do anything specific to me. I think maybe members of the public might appreciate when they could do Zoom. I know Michelle's getting a quote to see what it costs to get us microphones. But, you know, and plus I'm on federal grand jury duty, which I'm trying to get out of on Tuesday, but, I don't know if I will or I won't, but anyway, those are my thoughts. I just think that whatever, the only reason I bring it up here is because it's gonna cost some money, probably not a lot of money, but did you know how much you did it?
No, I asked Links for a quote about 3 weeks ago and still haven't gotten anything, but what I asked was, after Mr. Jadek's comment at the last council meeting about being able to live stream meetings, I asked him to provide a quote to set up something similar in here that we could have cameras on the wall that basically shoot from both angles, record everything, and then microphones to record audio. So as soon as I get a quote, you will get to have it.
That's all I have.
Alright, since we're still in public comment, I want to follow that a little bit on miscellaneous, which doesn't happen to fall into those categories. Any other public comment? Okay, then I'll say public comment. Murder's a big accusation, and I think we should be clear that we weren't responsible for that at this point. So, well, that's one thing that unbelievable that it is brought up. Secondly, I think we need to look into, with the finance committee's approval, looking at getting all borough council people a laptop or a yeah, the other one, sorry, I'm pissed off. iPad, thanks. Just to see what the cost would be. Doesn't have to, it'd be borough owned, borough returned, when you're not elected official anymore. And if we need it for other people, then fine, gets one. Okay. Sorry, fellas, so you had to deal with that. You're up.
Okay. Well, we have some more good news, so.
Amen to that.
We don't like that around here.
I'm gonna save the thunder for the end. Actually, we did an investment update too, since we're here and you're here. So I'll let Barry cover the investment activity. We updated it through June, quarter just ended, so let's start with that and then we'll move into the actuarial science stuff.
Okay, we'll go into the investment reports. Generally, we always hand out 3 reports. This condensed it, put all 3 into one report. So we'll start with the third page. Will state that it's the police pension plan, and we'll just go over the police pension plan. All 3 are invested basically in the same exact funds. The returns are almost similar, just cash flows are different. A slight bit difference in the allocation, but you can see year to date up 9.08%. Compared to 8.9%, and that is a benchmark that simulates the Russell indexes, the Barclays index, and also the MSCI International Index. For the quarter ending, you can see there was 471,000 coming out. I believe there was a payment that went to a participant. Not exactly sure who it was, but you can see $1.1 million gain, 5.85% for the quarter. So together with last year's return, you can see the 15.71, the previous year's return of over 20%. The plans are a little bit better funded. I'd just like to quickly go over the asset allocation. You can see that we do have the breakdown of the targets, the 50, 12, 32, 3, and 3. And a while back, we did increase the internationals up to 14%. 15%, which has been doing extremely well this year. When you do look at the international, you'll see a new fund. We added the Artisan International Value Fund, and we'll take a little bit of a look at that. The reason for that is that value's doing very well this year. All of your value funds that you have in the domestic equity are outperforming the growth this year, which is quite different than we've always seen. We've always seen Microsofts and Googles and the tech stocks doing so much better. Fixed income, new fund is the John Hancock Bond Fund. And the reason for that is we looked at the performance of the PGIM Total Return Bond Fund. It was more volatile than the other bond funds. It did hold some derivatives. And it just was buying a lot more high yield, and what we wanted was more of a stable bond fund. So the John Hancock was a great replacement, and we'll just take a look at the FI 360 and we'll see that that's a very highly rated fund. That was pretty much it for the changes. The next page is just the best of America. You know, it actually gives you the returns. You see the Cohen & Stearns real estate so far up 20% this year, and the international stocks, you can see that all the international stocks are pretty much double digits. The MFS, Intrinsic Value Fund, lagging behind, but it does hold a little bit more financials, and yeah, it's lagging the benchmark. You see the small cap stocks, no changes there. One of the interesting points is that JP Morgan that's the manager's behavioral value fund. That's a small cap value fund, and for the 12-month period, it's up 84%. And the first quarter of last year with the pandemic, that was the worst performing fund. Banks, local regional banks really went down hard, and so we took a good hard look at that fund because it was lagging the benchmark. We talked to the managers, and they just have a great long-term track record, so we stuck with it. And by doing that, not getting rid of a fund because of short-term performance, holding on to it, you can see that it is one of the better performers, up 84%. And in the large cap stocks, the biggest performer has been the Morgan Stanley International Growth Fund, the MSIF. You can see last year is up over 100%. So far this year, actually just had a very good quarter, 14%. Because the first quarter this year, all the technology stocks were pulling back. But since inflation fears have settled a little bit, everybody thinks inflation is transitory, that we've seen the PCE go up, which is what the Fed looks at, personal consumption, expenditures, and CPI is up. A lot of it can be transitory because of the pent-up demand and the shortage or constraints that we're seeing in supplies. But we are starting to see the job market really tighten up, and also wages go up, and that's what concerns me. So we are going to take a look at the bond holdings again, and maybe take a look at TIPS, inflation-protected bonds. In bond holdings, we have a core fix with double line. Diamond Hill is the high yield credit exposure in that portfolio is in Diamond Hill. And what we did last year when we added that fund, we were looking for a high yield fund that wasn't as volatile. So we're looking for shorter duration, and we did not have a lot of exposure to the E&P exploration and production in the oil field. So it's an area that we're concerned about. And it has some of the better risk figures for a high yield fund. So you can see so far this year, it's one of the few funds that are positive. John Hancock was a new fund that we added. You can see it's down 0.6 compared to the minus 1.6 for the benchmark. I'll just quickly go over the fiduciary score breakdown. And what you like to see is a lot of green. Yellow is pretty much in the middle. If a fund is out of favor for the last quarter, last 6 months, it may turn yellow. The one fund that we are looking at is the Eaton Vance Atlantic Capital. And this is a fund that's been closed for probably 4 years, 3-4 years. We did talk to the manager, but that was approximately 6 months ago, so we're gonna revisit that fund. It's in that mid-cap space, more growthier than Glen, so that's a fund that's gonna be a possible replacement. The other funds seem to be doing well. Prime Cap Odyssey Stock Fund, it does have that yellow, but last year in the first quarter, that fund was down over 30-some%. And it is proclaimed to have two of the better stock pickers in the whole mutual fund market by Barron's and Morningstar. And when we called them last year, they told us that United Airlines and Delta Airlines in their top 15 holdings, both of them were down 75% at the beginning of that pandemic. But they held on to it, and you'll see on that previous page how well they're doing this year and the fourth quarter of last year. So we're holding on to those funds too. You see with the international equities doing well there. The Artisan, very interesting. We did a search for all of international value, and this fund came to the top of our list. And I believe in February is when it opened up, or it might have been January, when it opened up to new investors again, because this is a fund that a lot of firms put money into. It opened up, we selected it, got it on June 30th, we closed again. That's how much money came into that fund. Just a great team, great process. We interviewed, actually the portfolio manager was there when we interviewed him. Just a great interview, love the process, looking at free cash flow, companies that are growing free cash flow, which a lot of companies will just say profitability. There's EBITDA, and there's a lot of balance sheet items that can maneuver to look profitable, but if you're growing free cash flow. Taxable bonds and the FI 360, I know we have a lot to cover, and again, when you take a look at that scatter plot, there's one fund on the outside, and that's Eaton Vance, and there's a Goldman Sachs fund that we're looking at that has 5-year and 10-year returns, lower risk factors. We may replace that Eaton Vance fund with that fund. And the tabs will just show the non-uniform pension plan, very similar results, 9% year to date, 6% quarter ending. And the last tab is the fire plan, very similar, 8.63 and 5.94. And one of the factors, why that one year number and year to date is down a little bit is when MMO monies come in, large positions come into the police and the non-uniform. And that fourth quarter of last year was one of the best quarters. So that's why we're seeing better returns in the police and non-uniform, because there's MMO money coming in. So it's a lot of timing. But all plans are doing well. Again, higher than your assumed rate of return already this year. We're not looking to get very aggressive. We do have a lot of value funds that are doing well, and I think we're well positioned.
Thank you.
Okay, so how does that translate into funding? That's always the million-dollar question. So I prepared the preliminary valuations and charted some scenarios for us to talk about, like we usually do, in value years. Police plan first, you'll see a separate sheet for each plan. On the far left is the 2019 filed results. That comes right from the Act 205 report. Funded ratio was 78.5% then, and at the very bottom on there. So after deducting member contributions and state aid estimate from that, your municipal piece was 573. So rolling forward, 2021. Liabilities are always increasing. You have more years of service, more costs for time rendered, but you can see that only went up about 800,000 or so, while the asset increase was 5 million. So dramatic change. know, that's a factor of making your contributions, plus some additional funds you put in, I think in 19, right? Yeah,
We put them in 19 or 20.
It was 19, it was not.
and now that you're funding your MMO on a quarterly basis, you're taking advantage of increasing market, that dollar cost averaging is adding a little bit of percent return every quarter. So, I was a little surprised that it changed, moved that much, but, you know, the plan went over 100%, which it's been a while since you've been there. On the normal cost front, that's a factor of payroll and the benefit structure. So that, again, typically there's an increase there, and as your population of employees gets a little bit older, until you replace them with, you know, younger officers, the normal cost is higher in later years. So that's a factor there. Yep. Now, instead of having amortization to pay off that unfunded liability, there's a credit. So you see that minus 92,798, that's 10% of the overfunded amount from above. You get a 10% credit based on that over 100% position. So that reduces the MMO amount, you still have member contributions, you won't need as much state aid then to pay the balance, and there's nothing left.
So where do you want to be? 95? Is 95 the number you want to be at?
You want to be over 90. Over 90, the state considers to be not distressed at all. It's a good measure. Even when you get to 100, though, you still have costs. There's still normal costs. You know, it doesn't disappear completely. But contributions and state aid will offset that cost.
Is there a point where the state will cut back if you're over a certain percent?
Yes,
Which is,
we're not there yet.
okay.
Not there
State
yet
aid,
this morning, or not there yet on that piece of paper?
not here at all yet. You're getting closer, but
You really need to lose.
yeah, well, we're not gonna, you don't wanna file the 205 based on that next column. We're continuing to move down the scale of keeping pace with mortality and keeping pace with your policy of reducing that interest rate assumption.
Sure.
So, the next scenario over, we take the first step. Scenario 1 is an update to the mortality table. In the actuarial profession now, they have developed a public sector mortality table specific to governments. And our actuarial firm, we've consulted pretty much across the board on all of our plans. We're going to move to that public sector table. It's more accurate for your groups of employees. Public safety, or police and fire, and it's called, I think I use the same label there on all 3 sheets, but there's a public general table that's applicable to non-public safety people, but it's specific to that group. So it's a little more accurate presentation of what the expectancy is for those employees' lifetimes. And it's updated using the most current scale. So they created that table, they developed it, it takes years for them to do these tables. It was 2010 when it was finalized, but then they update it every year. So now, pretty much going forward, is that table, that scale will be updated in each valuation as a regular course. So our recommendation is we want to apply that to this next valuation. Because the last time it was updated was 4 years ago. So it's time to bring it current again. Then I included 2 scenarios for reduction of the interest rate and salary scale. First one reduces it by 0.25%, from 7.5 to 7.25, same on salary. And then the last scenario 3 takes it down 0.5%. Now your policy, I think, just says 0.25% each 2-year cycle until you get to 6.5. I don't think you would be prohibited from moving more than that if you were inclined, but that's up to the committee. So, on the chart, we'll see on scenario 2, funding ratio is still slightly over 100%, but you do have a small obligation after member contributions and state aid is applied. Now, as I usually do, I'm a little conservative when I estimate state aid. I use the $5,000 unit value. But what I think is going to happen this year is every pension plan in the state has experienced the same last 2 years. And a lot of them are going to need less money than they did before. Those plans that were sort of on the break-even point, if they go below, that frees up money that gets spread about among all the other communities. So I think that unit value probably will go up more than 5,000, but I don't
We
want
did estimate 5,000
Yeah.
and 80 units.
right. But I don't want to, count money that we haven't received yet. But I think that obligation will be, at most somewhere around 43, probably less. And then scenario 3, if you were inclined to move 0.5%. So you're going from 573 down, even after bringing mortality current, reducing the interest rate, it still is a nice reduction. So let's look at the other two plans before you formulate your ideas.
Where did we come from? I forget where we were to start, what percent from the investment, was it 8%?
Yeah,
Yeah, we started high.
about 8 years ago, probably was 8%.
Got it.
Okay, on the non-uniform side, similar improvement. Funding ratio went from 83 to 94. And most of our plans, they were in that range. They improved anywhere from 8 to 12% over this 2-year window. So normal costs actually went down a little bit on this plan. If you think about that, well, why would that be happening? Well, this is a closed plan and you're not adding any new employees to the defined benefit arrangement. So that's not going to increase like it does in an open lease plan. So a little bit lower normal cost. Amortization is the unfunded liability is less than half of what it was 2 years ago. So the amortization comes down. Estimated state aid, again, 5,000 a unit for 26 units. Bottom line, about 100,000 months. And then the scenarios are exactly the same. Updating mortality, scenario 1, mortality and 1/4, mortality and 0.5%. So even changing 2 factors, using current mortality and reducing the interest rate in scenario 3, the municipal contribution is about the same. And then finally, on the fire plan, again, because it's a smaller plan, it did have a similar improvement, 77% to 86. Normal cost was a little higher. You have a smaller population, that's demographic driven there. But the amortization went down a little bit. Bottom line is state aid is covering the cost of that plan with whatever extra is left over, you use it to pay towards the DC components. And that continues until you get to scenario 3 where state aid is just a little bit less than the expected impact.
Okay.
Explain to me the salary scale assumption, is that wage increase?
Yes, that's assumption for wages. Now, good question, I usually just say, well, our contract has 2%, 2.5%. Well, between the interest rate and the salary scale, there cannot be more than a 3% variance by the state. They won't make you file a report. So you may not have a 4% increase, but the interest rate drives what that salary scale is.
Right, because I was
But
curious.
it's still making the assumption we're gonna give everybody a 4 or 4.5% increase.
Right, so when you don't, or if you don't, you get an actuarial gain. It helps down the road.
But we wanna get that down to 4.
Yeah, the goal
Up
is
there it's
6.5%
Yeah.
interest and 4% salary.
And the reason I recommended stopping at 4 is most payroll, when we look at actual 2-year results for a lot of plans, they're usually around 4%, because it's not just the contract increase, it's overtime and other components of compensation that usually are driving that increase, and we look at, that 2-year number. So 4 is a good floor to have, even if you keep using the interest salary scale, we suggest not going below 4. So that's why that was part of the policy. So, 460,000 roughly savings. If you go to scenario 3, the non-uniform plan was about the same, the fire plan had a small cost at the end. That puts you closer to state aid, but you're not going below the state aid. Your state aid last year was 389,000, and you paid 1.2 million. So we're reducing that total obligation, but you still generate the maximum state aid, but your contribution will be a lot less. Yeah, so there's 2021 this year, MMOs.
I've said this 100 times, but part of this is my personal, bit of an overreaction to fund these pensions when, what was it, December of 2019, the market went down 10% by itself.
Right.
And by mid-February, it's back to where it was.
Yes.
Which has now helped us, don't get me wrong, but it has now helped us down the road, but, I like to keep it on a smooth scale. Don't do any drastic jumps, because who knows what it'll be 2 years from now.
Right. As quickly as it improved, it's going to change the other way.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So our contribution was the real big one in 19 or 20 because of what happened in 19, or was it because of 21?
We paid a bunch, and
The cost of our MMO went up significantly as a result of the
20.
January
Right.
2019 valuation.
And when was that? When did that affect us?
This-
20 or 21?
Both.
Both. 20
And this year, the 21 chart that you have there shows
you
you
got
have,
that chart for us? That one.
yeah, this year's funding. Now, and think about that too. This improvement was at 1/1/21, the beginning of this year. But you still have these obligations for this year, so you're gonna be funding these large amounts on top of the 100%, so you're gonna get an increase this year, even though technically you don't need it, because we can't measure it till the next report.
So we're locked into this. for
You're
this
locked
year.
into
We
this
can't
for this
change
year. What these new results will allow you to do is adopt that for next year's MMO.
So, I'm looking at it on that, you have a bit, Phyllis. This year's is 2021, paying 181 a quarter.
Correct.
So our 20.
That's the estimate of the gap between the commitment and what we expect to receive in state aid in the fall.
181,000 a quarter.
Correct.
So that's 750,000.
And what is it this year?
That is this year.
I'm sorry, what would you project it to be for next year? We can't do
Well,
that.
instead of your MMOs being at 1.2 million, it'll be about 750,000.
That's what I was trying to figure
And
out.
the state aid will stay the same,
Yeah,
around
state
400.
aid, yeah, plus or minus.
So we're looking at $400,000 reduction.
Right.
Okay. That's what I'm thinking, I'm sorry.
Well, but, yeah, follow the path, get there.
You were on that at the time. I've asked these dumb questions before. Okay.
So, for the committee, it's just a matter of which scenario would you like us to use in the next filing, when we finalize it.
I'll chime in first. Again, I understand where we're trying to get to. I understand what we're trying to do. I don't like overreactions either way. So I'm okay with just dropping it from 7.5 to 7.25 and pay the salary scale from 4.5 to 7.25. But that's just one member's opinion. This could be a year to go bigger and get going. And I know, I wish John Gallo was here. But,
John will be saying, where's the 6.75
Right,
scenario?
where's
That's
the
the end.
Yeah. Or Paul Brass too.
It doesn't, even though we're down $400,000 next year, it doesn't include us from being able to put in extra if we wanted to.
Right, exactly.
So, you know.
Or-
For budgeting purposes, it would be nice to get quote unquote $400,000.
Right.
But if the budgeting works out well, it doesn't mean that we can't later go back and say, let's add 400,000.
Or you could decide, hey, you know, we have the funds, let's still use the 2019 valuation to calculate next year's MMO. You could do that, I don't know why you would, but.
I was gonna say, we already did that for 2 years, that's enough.
Right. But you have that option. But it's, I always tell clients, it's better not to lock yourself into a higher obligation. You can always voluntarily put more in if you want to. So take advantage of the new results, reduce your required obligation, and you have extra that you want to fund.
I'm kind of curious, if we did, well, whatever scenario, in today's scenario, we're at 104 police pension, 94 on the non-uniformed, 86, so let's say that's about what?
100.
Okay, so I don't know. That's a good number to have, okay.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't know, like, again, not being in the municipal world and all of this, but what I would do from a business standpoint is we budgeted $750,000 for 2021, and we're gonna have a $400,000 reduction from what we have to put in based on what the guidelines were. From a business standpoint, what I would do if it was my business running it, I would budget for $600,000. I put $200,000 in a reserve for future, whenever, not pay it to the MMO, but put it into a rainy day fund of a reserve from the budget, and keep that there in case you have an anomaly like you did in 2019, then you don't have to pay it. So I would budget something in between, and reserve the dollars, and just keep it on hand. That it could be designated for that, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
That argument could be made at the budgeting time, not today.
No, I'm saying that, but in that case, though, I would go with the lowest number.
You go to scenario 3.
But budget higher.
Start to count the votes.
You know, I agree with Keith, I think I'd go with the scenario, let's go for it.
But I budget higher.
Yeah, budget on it.
The budget has to be equal to the MMI.
Right.
when we adopt the budget.
So if we decided we want to start budgeting for excess payments, we could in his scenario.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting we budget for excess payments potentially in the future, but we aren't locked in.
But
Why? Does the municipal budget, can we budget them out? Because the auditors are always looking.
You
for
can,
the
but you don't want to call it pension. You don't want to, if it's designated as pension asset, it would conceivably need to be counted anyway. So, rainy day fund, capital preservation fund, whatever non-pension terminology that you set aside extra funds, they never look at your other general fund
Yeah,
stuff.
because I'm not, I wouldn't, you don't need to label it pension because it doesn't have to go there.
That's
but
right.
It can.
That's right.
But it's in the budget so that if you have to, you don't have a surprise like you did in 19.
Back in that time, you know, in 19, we dumped a lot of money into the fund. We were hemorrhaging because the stock didn't look good at all. And,
on paper,
on
the
paper.
reality wasn't that bad.
But we felt at the time it was.
No, yeah, we had to do it, sure.
Yeah.
I get it. All right, so there's 3 committee members here, correct?
Yeah, we don't have.
So we have enough room. All right, so
I'll make a motion for the scenario.
scenario number 3, Keith made a motion to go to scenario number 3. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Go to scenario number 3.
Now this has to be council.
Yeah.
But John's here and he
Yeah. I thought we overreacted last time a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
a similar discussion we had with another township that had a pretty significant, what about a reserve, what else can we do? Now, they have an OPEB plan, so they're gonna start setting aside some funding. You don't provide post-employment review.
We do,
Okay.
and we treat it as it's paid. We
Okay.
have a valuation that's disclosed in the footnotes.
Okay, well, there's an idea for you.
So how's that?
So, other post-employment benefits, which is post-retirement health insurance for, okay,
Retired police
or
officers.
retired police officers. So, most municipalities are pay-as-you-go. You're paying the premiums every year as whoever's being covered, you're funding that from general fund somewhere. So, and in your financials, you have an actuarial valuation in order to determine the liability for that obligation. But it looks very much like a pension plan. So, if you start setting aside funds to cover those payments, eventually that account will pay the premiums and you don't need general fund money anymore. So that could be a parking place for some excess savings that you may want to use.
So you mentioned other municipalities. So what are you finding? What are other municipalities doing when they're in this situation? What do you think is the consensus?
Well, they are doing the same thing, we're updating mortality, reducing interest rate. The target, most plans now, the norm is at 7%. We have some that are below, we have, the other ones who aren't there yet are moving to 7. That's the norm. And if they're having substantial savings, we're looking for if they dropped, one of our clients in Lancaster, they dropped well below the state aid threshold. Well, now, how can we increase costs in order to still get that money? So we're gonna further reduce the interest, look at some other changes that we can make. They happen to use smoothing, so if we continue using smoothing, some of those gains are deferred and the cost will be stable. So but they also have no pad, that's why I thought of it, is they're paying post-employment, they have no plan document, no trust account, no assets. But if you start accumulating that, then, so another client, East Enfield in Lancaster County, they started an OPEB account 7-8 years ago. It's built up about $2 million. Eventually, that will be self-sufficient. They will pay the premiums out of that, and it will no longer be a general fund expense. So
Look into.
it's,
That fund, you're not looking at the same assumed interest rate. When we did it at East Hempfield, we did like a 50-50 mix of equities and bonds, used all index funds, and they've been generating 6.5% return over all these years. Whereas if you put it in a separate account, you're limited on what you invest in.
What's the annual, we have any or annual expenditures for that?
Well, we currently have 3 officers that are on the borough plan, and they reimburse us the balance over the benefit. It depends on when they retire. 2 of the officers retired when the benefit was $650, possibly, like that. Or it was 600 originally, and the most recent contract brought it to 750. There's 1 officer under that provision. We have 2 additional officers that got insurance off of the borough plan, and so we reimburse them on a monthly basis. Actually, with Gets was 3, where we actually reimburse them the cost of their medical insurance up to the contract value.
So it's only 3 people.
We have 3 on the borough plan, and we have 3 off the borough plan.
So it's less than $100,000 a year.
Oh, well, less.
Okay.
yeah, so your liability, might not be $1 million a year.
It's running between 20 and 30,000.
Sorry?
20 and 30 a year because there's a monthly payment.
Okay, got it. All right. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Just seeing everybody
Explain
again.
the statements
Oh,
that
I'm
are
sorry.
in it.
Yeah, we also,
Sorry.
just additional reports that we send to the borough. There are 2 statements that we prepare every year. In the first quarter, there's a GASB 68 actuarial information update. And what that does is revalues that funded ratio on an annual basis so that you have an interim year gauge. these 205 reports are every 2 years. Well, instead of waiting for 2 years to see what, where did we go from 78 to 104? In the off years, that GASB 68 report has a funded ratio update at the end of each year. And at the back of it, there's gonna be a 10-year history, so you can kind of look back, where were we 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago? Then in the second quarter, usually we prepare, this is a financial statement. Just like any financial statement you would see your borough, corporate. It has balance sheet, income statement, it has footnotes that provide the, let's scroll through real quick, it's not that long. Balance sheet, where the assets, there's the income statement, where the contribution components, state aid, municipal, and so on at the top there. And then there's footnotes. I usually say this is a good document for new employees because it has a nice summary of the benefit structure of each plan that you could give to them. Now they can read the ordinance and see all the language, but it summarizes it in more user-friendly terms. There's a lot of accounting footnotes. There's a rating of all the bond holdings. Again, just a bunch of required disclosures. There's the funded ratio on an accounting basis at the end of last year. It's a little different from the actuarial basis, but they're similar. There's the sensitivity. What if we increase or decrease the interest rate by a full percentage point? What happens to that unfunded or overfunded position? And then this would be a 10-year list of all of that data. Contributions, earnings, all the components. So good reference document. Good document for new hires, and we prepare it annually, and we just say, hey, make sure you're aware of it, it's out there for monitoring purposes. There's one for each plan, and the defined benefit and the defined contribution we do separately, so there's 5 reports.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the committee should,
We make a recommendation to approve that.
So moved.
Sorry.
So we have a recommendation to approve the pension, all the pension plan financial statements for these candidates December 31st, 2020. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, approve that on the counts.
Anything else?
is everything.
Thanks.
Okay.
Now, thank you.
Thank you. It's always easy when there's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Nobody's throwing stuff back there.
Hold on to the money till you're in, Barry. That's what I can say.
Steve, aren't you gonna invite him to stay?
No. It's all not for it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Good rest of the summer.
They meant it. I don't know what they want.
We'll see you in 6 months probably.
But who's counting?
All right. Take care.
Take care.
I don't have the only thing I didn't, is what's next on the agenda? Right now, I'm not taking
Back up.
okay, moving on.
All right, starting with the cash update. At the end of June, cash and investments totaled $12,745,000. It's an increase of $723,000 over the end of May and over $4 million since the end of the calendar year. The increase since May is attributed to 2 factors. One, we received the American Recovery Plan distribution tranche number 1, the amount of $556,000. We also received the reimbursement from the DCAD of the engineering fees that had been pending for a number of months, and they had been paid quite some time ago. Also pending at this time are 2 payment apps or borrowers number 6 and 7 totaling $317,000. She'll give an update on processing of that.
Colleen's been on vacation for the past 2 weeks, so I would expect they'll be submitted sometime in the next week or 2. I would say end of July.
Okay, so cash balance when those reimbursements are received will be over $13 million. Interest rates had been holding fairly steady at 0.1%, pretty much since November. At the end of May, the savings account dropped just below that, so depending on the balances at either at 0.09% or 0.08%. So we actually got to a scenario when the ICS account rate exceeded the local districts. I did do some additional searching for better CD rates, and I found nothing. I've kept my eyes on Pliget, which is the Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust. They're way down. I also talked to Santander, and they don't even have CDs available. They actually have a governmental account. The terms of our loan structure require us to keep our deposit accounts at VIST. So I confirmed with our loan officer, Pete Rowley, that moving money to ICS does not violate any of our terms with our debt arrangement. So just before the end of June, I moved $6,444,000 from the savings account back to the ICS account, which we kept open just for this purpose. It's only worth 0.01%, but when you're looking at $6 million, it's a few dollars a month. I just learned at the end of yesterday that the ICS account product is actually going to be renamed. ICS stands for Insured Cash Sweep. It's now going to be referred to as the Infra-Fi Network Deposits. So that change will be coming. They said the
Is
product.
that what this changed it to?
Yep, Intra-Fi Network Deposits rather than ICS. The product is exactly the same. There's no action required by the borough. It's the same account, same login, same everything. But with that said, the ICS account now has $6,445,000, and I just have operating cash left at the local VIST in the checking and the savings account to fund payroll and the weekly check runs and so forth. Also of note, the 2 certificates that were purchased in February, the first one is coming due in August. That will be August 5th, which is actually the date of our next meeting. So I did contact this and ask about what rate to expect on that document when it matures. There's an automatic renewal feature, but they can't quote me an interest rate now. I have to wait till closer to renewal. My instructions were that if the rate at renewal is going to be less than ICS, that we wouldn't want to commit those funds for another term, that we would just let it mature and then move the money to the Infra-Fi Network Deposits.
You're gonna have to come up with initials for that.
IFD.
Yeah. So anyway,
It's called ICS.
unless the committee would like to have me contact you by email and let you know what the interest rate is, and let the committee weigh in on what to do with the funds at maturity. As I said, the maturity date is the date of our next meeting. I can keep you informed as to the rate at the
Why don't you just let
moment.
us know what you did?
Yeah.
If it's below the ICS, move it to where,
Move it to ICS,
Into the rate
let it
structure
mature
where
and
it's
move
going.
the money to ICS.
yeah.
You don't see you needing it for operations.
No, I have adequate funds for operations,
No.
particularly when the DCD reimbursement.
If it's better than ICS, reinvest it for 6 months. If it's not, move it to ICS.
Right.
We need to make a motion for that. Okay, do that. Alright, so anybody want to make that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Any questions on cash or investments at this time? Moving on to the June results. For the month of June, revenues exceeded expenditures by $1,171,000. Now keep in mind that includes the receipt of the American Rescue Plan funds as well as additional tax receipts. That will bring the year-to-date excess of revenues over expenses to $4,140,000. When we look at the comparative results, we'll see that that is entirely a temporary situation. At this time of year, we have received a large portion of our revenues, but we have not yet expended what we've planned for capital expenditures, and that will be apparent shortly. Of when you add the 4 million to the beginning of the year fund balance, currently the fund balance is at 13,640,000. 1.4 of that is reserved. The detail of the reserve follows here. A little bigger. See that?
You've got the COVID money and the recovery money in there. Yeah.
Here we go. June activity on the reserves include an additional month for the MS4 commitment. So that brings the total available for future MS4 commitments to 280,000. The donation was received from the Wolves for the police cameras, both body and car, in the amount of 55,000. So that will be held until we incur those expenses. And the American Recovery Plan received was in the amount of 556,000. On the reserves that were funded from the Equus real estate tax transfer, the work has progressed on the steps from Park Road down to the pool, or I'm sorry, Parkside Drive down to the pool. I think this week's check run has some additional stone costs, but it will come in underneath the 10,000. And the work at the Berkshire Heights for the bollards, I believe the work actually started this week. So that will be total reserves at the end of June of 1,477,000.
And we said we were gonna take the emergency repairs to the bridge out of that as well, right?
That 23,
24,000.
give or take, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So, with reserves of 1,477,000, the unreserved fund balance at the end of June was 12,162,000. With the pending activity from the DCD reimbursements, the unreserved fund balance would be 12,480,000. Already included in fund balance are accounts receivable. The end of June was a quarterly billing for the utility accounts. Also included already in that is the payable for the 41,000 was the payable for the dump truck. Any questions on the position, the fund balance position at the end of June?
We still don't have any definition for the American Recovery Fund. We still don't know.
Well, we know the categories that it falls into, and I did confirm with Herbine the proper recording of that receipt. It was received from the state, but it's actual federal funding. So there is a specific sequence of accounts where it needs to be recorded. The actual payment advice came through with a description of community and economic development. So I chose that particular account in the federal sequence of accounts in the state's chart of accounts. The way Herbine explained it to me is is properly recorded as current year revenue. However, if at the end of the calendar year we haven't spent any portion of that, those funds would be moved from the income statement to the balance sheet as deferred revenue, for the reason of the single act requirements. The spending of those, the recording of those funds have to be in the year that they're spent. And when I use the term spent, we could use the category that says we're replacing revenue loss from the pandemic, which would free up other funds for fund balance. So those regulations are not yet finalized. So for the time being, the proper recording of that revenue is on the income statement as a federal revenue.
So if we would use the category of replacing lost revenues during the COVID, they could go back into the general fund or be designated for something outside the scope of this.
Right.
Do you have any idea what our potential lost revenues were?
I had
justified.
quantified some of that, and there's very specific direct revenue accounts that we can identify. There is other revenue accounts that are offset by expense savings, and we're just not sure of the definition yet to see if they qualify.
But there's no definition that we can just use this for infrastructure. We can put this towards roads or put it towards sewer project.
You can, yes, but they're very broad definitions.
but we'd have to justify it at some point, somewhere along the line, we'd have to say that here's where we use the money and we don't, and if we use it the wrong place, then it's not considered.
Potentially pay it back.
Right.
And that's the other piece to it, there's not really been any clear guidance on if you do spend it, here's what you have to show to report
Right.
down the road.
Chris, do you know what other municipalities are doing at this point? Are they doing anything with it?
They're struggling.
Are they just parking it for now and getting point zero
They
zero
were
zero
trying to
one?
identify projects. Yeah, I mean, nobody has spent the money
Yeah.
yet. We're identifying projects.
Okay, so everybody just kind of.
So currently it is recorded as a revenue in the federal sequence in the chart of accounts. Okay. So that's the fund balance. As part of the reserves. Alright, so if we look at the revenue, so we can see them together. Alright, so the top is the revenues, the bottom is the expenditures. When I refer to a temporary condition, let me just, for the month of January, revenues totaled, $2,931,000. Year-to-date, $13,261,000. That represents about 65% of the year's revenue. When we look at expenditures, however, for the month of June, expenditures totaled $1,759,000. Year-to-date, $9,120,000. Just 42% of the budgeted expenditures. So when we look at the expenditure detail, you'll see that most of the capital expenditures have not yet been paid.
Phyllis, the 10 million, that includes the American Recovery Act? The 556, 10 million, year to date?
The 10 million is from 2020, the current year.
No, 2021, year to date,
Year to date.
2021.
Oh, in the general fund,
In
yes.
revenues, yeah.
Yes, it
10,
does.
so that includes the 556,
It does.
and it includes the 341 from the ECHOS.
It does, yes.
So then actually, I mean, without those two anomalies, we're probably below the 65% that we're behind in terms of where we would have been in 19. Because I mean, I'm looking at those as one-offs that won't occur again. Well, next year, well, I guess
Again,
with the
well,
one,
yeah.
but
But there's always something unusual like that.
$500,000? I hope.
Well, for tax, yeah, there's always unusual activity that would be reflected in 19 and 20. And look at the net results, you see the month of June, revenues exceeded.
Well, hold on a second, it's not about that. But what we never did in 19 is take out those unusual anomalies either.
Right, that's what I'm saying, they're always included, and there's always something
I
each year.
just don't think it's $1 million.
Probably not, but just to be clear, we didn't do
Right.
that
No, I
then,
understand.
so you can't
Right.
just blanketly compare that to that with, I don't understand. Okay, sorry.
Okay. The net results as reported for the month of June, 1,171,000, year-to-date, 4,140,000. The June transactions of note include the American Recovery Plan in the amount of $556,000, DCD reimbursement of the engineering fees, and that has been hanging for some time. That was in the amount of $200,000, and the donation from the Wolves for the police cameras in the amount of $55,000. Expenditures included the payment of borrower's application number 7, the amount of $151,000. The MMO contributions were made as approved in the amount of $181,000. The purchase of the second police vehicle was paid in the amount of $40,000, and the annual payment for emergency management was paid in the amount of $20,000. Any questions on the June recap? We look at the specific revenue categories. The tax collector reported collections in the amount of $507,000. The borough does not receive that entire amount during the month. The borough's report of tax actually received in cash nets to $60,000. To explain that difference, the borough received $26,000 from May collections. Of the $507,000 collected by the tax collector, most came right at the due date and was processed and remitted to the borough just on Tuesday. I got most of that. So the net amount for the borough is $60,000. That represents total collections of over 95%, with just under 5% outstanding. There's a total of 212 bills that yet to collect. So very comparable to 2019 here.
Good.
Any variances you see are entirely timing differences. There's no reflection on the collectability of those. When those gross receipts are added to the interim collections, penalties, and discounts, the month of June in the current year is just $62,000 compared to last year of $503,000. Again, entirely timing differences as a result of the due dates and the extended due dates. So there's no concern related to real estate taxes. On local taxes, for the month of June, 971 was collected and included the large quarterly distribution from EIT tax. On a year-to-date basis, total local taxes total $3,737,000, or 80% of the current year budget. It does include the transfer tax. If we considered the total without the transfer tax from Equus, local taxes would still be $3,395,000 with a positive variance of $941,000. Okay. I do have additional detail by the categories because we are at the mid-year point. You can see first looking at the real estate transfer tax for the month of June, we collected $96,000. It did include the sale of the Crown Plaza. Tax collected on that sale alone was $53,000. We have a year-to-date positive variance of $462,000. Looking at earned income tax, you can see on the remittance schedule, we did receive a large distribution this month. Additional distribution of that magnitude will be received in September and December. We are already at 67% of the budgeted amount. It is likely that the budget for the year was entirely conservative. When we budgeted in the fall, we were unaware of the December receipt. All out of our control, so we should expect a large positive variance to year end.
We like that.
When we look at the mercantile tax, for the month of June, mercantile tax total $89,000, year to date $1,066,000. We've already exceeded the budget for the Wyomissing portion. We had budgeted $225,000. Total collections through the end of June total $267,000. The Wyomissing the Wilson portion of it is short by about $100,000. Not certain that we will receive an additional $100,000 the remaining part of the year. Collections are concentrated following the due date, and the due date for the 2021 returns was May 17th. So we will receive additional collections, not certain that we'll reach another $100,000, but it will be offset by what's been collected by missing portion. Okay?
So close.
We should be close. When we look at the local services tax, we are making some ground there. If you look at the pattern of collections, you'll see that for the month of June, collections totaled $82,000. Year to date, $275,000. So a negative variance of 33,000 when compared to the prior year. You see that we are returning to levels that were pre-pandemic, but we're not there yet. The pandemic levels, you can see the large quarterly distributions were 111,000 each of August and November the prior year. When we got to the first quarter distribution received in March, it ticked up a little bit to 117,000. This quarterly distribution was actually spread over May and June, and collectively it's 130,000. So we're not quite back to the pre-pandemic levels, but we're getting there.
Okay.
Any questions on local taxes? Recap of the capital projects. For the month of June, payment was made on application number 7 following council approval. Application number 8 was received, bringing the project to 69% complete. After holding the retainage and applying the previous payments, application number 8 in the amount of $253,000 was approved by the infrastructure committee and is pending council approval next Tuesday. Work on the 2021 street projects unrelated to 4th Street. The scope includes Cherrywood Hill and the Park Pass, and the work on Hill Avenue has begun, so we should expect a payment app for the work for the month of July. In the next, it'll come in, beginning of August. The sidewalk work has not yet been scheduled, but that contract did come in under budget by $11,000. Mr. Rehab is dragging his feet on these few final items, and so we have not received the payment app, but when it does come, it will be final. And that should come in pretty close to budget. Water project is complete. The infrastructure approved the payment, and it is pending council approval next week in the amount of $138,000. We look at total capital expenditures for the month of June of $243,000. As already reported, the police vehicle was purchased for $40,000. Engineering has begun on the MS4 projects. The deposit was made on the chassis for the dump truck in the amount of $41,000. Payment application was made to Barvis in the amount of $151,000. Engineering work was incurred for the 4th Street that is no longer being passed along to Equus. And the work that is in the Parks Improvement category is continued progress on the Stonehouse Master Plan. That plan is, I believe, at 95% with an additional $1,300 remaining on that contract. That brings total year-to-date capital expenditures to $1,177,000, just 26% of the total budget. And that's why the excess revenue over expenditures is a temporary condition. When the balance of the capital expenditures are made, that will flip.
Yep.
Any questions on capital expenditures? That's all I have. I wanted to alert you to the fact that the Green Light Go program that was suspended in 2020 has been funded with the appropriation bill signed by the governor. At the time that the project was suspended in 2020, we had incurred some design fees, and we did receive our grant reimbursement. We had incurred design fees of $9,800, and we did receive 80% grant reimbursement for that. So Jim is working with McCarthy at this time. I think the project is almost shovel ready. So So we have to, Jim will give us more information as to the status of that project, but it is funded again. There was an amount quoted by, FM,
I have it. So we received $420,384. This program has a 20% match, so we'll be putting in $84,076.
however, that amount that's quoted is in excess of the original grant agreement.
So I'm wondering if they combine 18
Combine.
and 19,
Right.
since 19 got shelved too. And then the other piece to that is we just submitted for the Arlie grant, which is roughly 910,000, and that has no match. And we included in the Arlie grant everything from 18, 19, and balance.
So this is separate, this isn't the same, this is two separate issues.
Correct, this is something, the 420,000 through Greenlight Go is something we applied for back in 2018, and then the state came back and said, we approved your app, but sorry, we have no money, we're putting this on hold. And then the same thing happened in 19, and then they suddenly announced last week, we have money.
So, what you're reading in the paper or hearing in the news, that 420 will give you will give you more detail on that.
Though I would suggest you wait and see what the status of the Arlie funding is, because there's no match for that. And that's everything that was covered in 18, 19, plus the balance of every cabinet, controller, LED light borough-wide that needed to be replaced, getting done for zero cost to us.
But if we take the 420, we have to match it with 84.
Correct.
So we don't have to take the 420.
I would suggest you wait and see what the announcement is on Arlie and then make a decision.
Could you use your own?
We could use Arlie for something different too.
Jim McCarthy would need to answer that question.
If we could use Arlie for something.
Yeah, because, I mean, Arlie was meant to cover everything we'd love to do.
Okay.
We currently have nothing in the budget for Great Mike Go.
For the 84.
We'll have to that's not in the
I
budget.
say
Chris,
the
I don't-
84,000 is not the budget.
That's right.
Chris, I don't know if we can use the Arlie. I mean, that's kind of one of those,
We used to Arlie to cover the 84,000.
yeah, that was what Chris asked. I mean, that's kind of like if we get community funding money, can we use that to balance RACP if we get RACP funding for the public works project?
Absolutely.
So,
Well, obviously, if we can use, well, not obviously, but if we can use the Arlie money for something different. Bridge.
no, we can't. That is specific to traffic signals because Arlie stands for
Arlie's only.
automatic red light enforcement. So all the money the state receives from,
You know, when I started at Borough Council, I asked people to write down initials and what they were talking about. I'm getting back to it. I don't remember what all this stands for.
So that's everything I have for June. Any questions?
All right, moving on, other business, corporate, private sponsorship policy.
so I have to do that on the agenda. I know Keith and Steve are aware, I had a meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago with various business representatives from different companies that are located in the borough. And one of the shocking things coming out of that conversation was a funding commitment, oh, John's aware of this too, a funding commitment for about $150,000 for a recreation project.
Don't count on
Which is fine, but it still
$100,000.
leads,
Or anywhere
and-
there nearby.
which is also fine, but it leads to a
Well,
it leads to a bigger conversation of, just in talking to these different individuals, businesses, and not just that particular one. I think there's a lot of interest from companies in the borough to do public-private partnership projects specific to rec or other things that may need to get done. We have nothing official as to any type of agreement or understanding if a corporate sponsor gives the borough money, what's involved for any type of marketing, advertisement. A good example is the bike route. I got about $50,000 between different entities like Teleflex, Slyfox, Equus, Customers Bank, who put their name in the newsletter. I had things done or, set at different events to recognize them. I intend to do that if we do an inaugural ride of the bike route. But I think the borough in general needs to come up with some type of policy for if you're a corporate sponsor and you give us money towards something, these are our expectations of you, and these are your expectations of us, so everybody's on the same page. And I tried to search to find
So
something.
Tom, give me some historical background on this.
Well, we had a big to-do with the, over at Berkshire Heights Playground.
Remember that, yeah.
With the signs, and one of the things that came out of that was, as I recall, is they let that go, but they didn't want signage all over the place. We're not, Borough Wyomissing is not for sale. For advertising this, advertising that, or down at the, then there's somebody who wanted it at the pool, they wanted it at the Stone House. Where do we go from there with that kind of stuff?
I remember the Berkshire Heights thing, because I wasn't on the council yet, yeah. One of the signs was ours. I just wanted to take it up and take it down. Once the season's over, it wasn't permanent, but.
You know, and I think they were using the, over there was a lot of ballparks have it.
The outfield fronts.
The outfield, you know, that's fine.
We now allow it out at the Quarry Soccer Field. I mean, that was part of the new arrangement that Bethany had drafted. They're allowed some types of temporary signage out there, similar to what's allowed at Berkshire Heights.
But
And I'm not, I mean, to be clear, I am not talking about placarding any area of the borough with signs, but I'm saying whether it's a thank you in our newsletter or a recognition at a council meeting, I think it would be helpful to me and Dan when having these potential conversations. If someone says, well, if I give you X amount of money, what recognition am I going to get for that? That I can have some type of general answer.
Well, listen, it's 2021, I don't really see any reason there's not, could be something on the website, non-permanent structure types of things. I mean, I always go back to that thing over in Wyomissing Hills where back in 19-something, they donated, the Hills had a whole bunch of different corporations donate to that sign, and I think 2 years ago we finally said, just take it down, you ought to look at it.
Yeah.
And I think 70% of the businesses were
There.
no longer there, were purchased by 3 other companies, or the people who personally donated don't even live in the borough anymore. But I think we at least have to think about being able to offer these corporations and individuals some kind of publicity for it in a non-materialistic way. I mean, something as simple as website recognition,
Resolution, like what we did for the Wolves.
resolutions, yeah, all that kind of stuff, maybe if it's a retail, like the Wolves don't need a plaque saying thank you for your donation, but if Sly Fox would like something nice for their front door saying thank you for the donation to the borough, and it wants to get some PR out of it, it's in their building, not in ours, I think that would be okay. But I agree, we don't want, we're hearing crap about people putting up bike signs around the borough, let alone bike sign donated by underneath the bike sign. And I know we're not going there, but you get my point. I don't, and again, it's just one person's opinion, I don't know what everybody else feels about it, but the newsletter I think is okay too.
Newsletter's fine, recognition of a company for their own benefit, a plaque that says proud sponsor of, or Wyomissing, whatever project. I just don't wanna start seeing signs.
Neon signs on the park.
No, no.
Blinking neon signs.
No, just, one thing just leads to another, and like I said, to the ball field, or over at the soccer field, that's fine.
So something like, and I know we discussed it before, and this is where the CTE sets in, I don't know where we ended up on it, but like borough park benches. I know some people have a bird about having someone put a little plaque. So is it possible to, out of the tree house, if I got the right house, the one out in Parks?
That's Parks Park.
Okay, the Parks Barn, where's the tree house?
That's
in the
over
hills.
Wyomissing
That's in the
Hills.
hills.
That's
I
lovely.
got an idea. So the Parks Barn, you know, somewhere along there, they could say benches donated by, and have one spot that lists all the benches that were donated, and you can pop it on and off once a year, as opposed to every bench having something stamped. And I would agree that if we're gonna do it, they all gotta be the same bench. Someone, some big family says, I wanna have a 12, I wanna have a family size 12-person bench, no.
Dan
Right.
came up with a company and he had talked to Jinx about that. There's a company that like you pick whatever the prototype is you want for your bench, and then you put the link specific to that bench on your website, so a donor could go on for a Wyomissing website, click on the sponsor a bench, purchase everything, it ships directly to us. There is an option to personalize it, we would not go for that option, we would just do something on, like you said, a sign at the
Yeah,
park.
when you go down to the beach in Cape May and you see along
Yeah.
the walk, every bench has 62 names on it. It defeats the purpose. Go to one place and look at all 1,000 names, you know what I mean? Just one person's opinion, excuse me. So I guess the point of this conversation is we gotta come up with some kind of thought process on how to, because we can't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's sort of our financial responsibility that if someone wants to donate something that we don't have to no longer pay for, or improves, I think we need to do so, but we gotta do it in a appropriate, tactful way, is a good way to put it, yes.
And uniform.
And uniform, yeah, everything's the same.
Well,
So
Everybody's the same.
I'm just using the park bench as an example, it could be 1,000 other things that I'm not even thinking about, but the park bench, if we do it, it's one park bench, it's the same park bench.
Mhm.
One's not green, one's not yellow, they're all the same color, whatever that color happens to be. And there's a plaque somewhere out in that's already there, not a new structure, put it on the wall of the barn, and say, these 5 families donated to benches, and there's 7 more families donated once a year, just update the list.
So, I mean, that got shot down in flames the last Park and Shade Committee meeting because of the plaques, and it
They
was,
wanted the plaques.
no, they're staunchly opposed to the
Oh,
plaques.
I can't argue that.
So I mean, we meet again at the end of this month, so maybe that will be an option they find more acceptable. But that's a perfect example of that, something that is long-term going to be maintenance, repair, replacement, that we could have other people paying for instead of us.
Yeah, I mean, I just think a central location of the donators would be better than individual benches. I'm gonna go back to the stupid fence argument. The one thing I will tell you about the stupid fence argument that everybody was anti-fence was dead right about is I don't think, like, there's a name on every one of those columns. I don't think there should be any names in those columns. They should be listed they are already listed on the plaque on the field house. Didn't make a separate memorial, just put a plaque on the building. You know, I think I'd go that route, not the individual memorialization.
I mean, heads up, the next rec board, if not this month's rec board meeting, August, you're gonna be getting a request for naming rights for the Stone House.
Yeah, so someone wants to name the Stone House like the Wells Fargo Center?
I'm sorry, not the Stone House, the Happy Hollow Pavilion.
So someone wants to name the Wells Fargo, I'm using Wells Fargo because of the Wells Fargo Wyomissing Pavilion. $1 million if they get something.
Has one of the committees decided that they're getting donations for benches or potentially getting them? Has somebody sat down and said, here are all the locations where a bench should be?
We haven't even done that part, because Park and Shade was like absolutely not.
Because I mean, you can't all of a sudden throw out 20 benches and you don't need 20 benches.
No.
Yeah.
I would think between the different locations and just the amount that, within the past month, the Parks Department was focusing on the ones around the Stone House primarily because of the 4th of July parade. There's enough benches at other locations that I think we could get 20 to 30 sponsors to replace existing benches without adding new ones.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that we should put more benches.
Well, that's what I was,
No.
envision you open this up and say.
No, there's a million benches out there. No, it's a certain number, finite number of benches, and
Right.
the only time you get to donate a new one is when one dies. Not I mean the donor, I meant the bench.
I know.
Shoot that out, whatever, you're done.
Oh, boy.
Alright, anything else?
I have one very quick thing, and this is very last minute. I had a conversation with Mark Radcliffe at the end of last week about the 2 boroughs, West Harding and Wyomissing, potentially applying for a DCED multimodal grant, which would be due at the end of this month. We're going to set up a call with Colleen, actually it's set up for later this afternoon. There's no match requirement. DCED always waives the municipal match requirement, so this is more of just an FYI, we're looking at potentially doing something together. And it would be streetscape.
Alright, the couple things, I may not be at the meeting Tuesday night. No, not today. So Keith, you get the report on all this? I talked about the laptops. I think we just gotta get a number for laptops or iPads.
It's on the list.
Okay. You'll talk about the pension, percentage where we stand. I think we should be able to present, it doesn't have to be this month, but at some point, maybe at the end of the summer, a listing of all the grants that the borough has received over the last 2 years and what is pending for the last 2 years. I think at the end of the day, when we talk in public and we get questioned by the public about what are you doing, well, how about the fact that we got, this is the grants that we've applied for, and these are the grants that are still pending, we may not get any of them.
What I sent you.
But I think it's important to let the public know that we're not just counting on every penny of their tax dollar. We're trying to find revenue everywhere we can within reason, not a naming right to the pavilion necessarily, but within reason to be able to continue to offer the services that I think are outstanding in the borough of Wyomissing. So I think it'd be important for the public to know, and to the people around this table and anybody that comes to all the meetings, it's not a big surprise, except the fact that when you put it all together on one list and it shows this is how much we've received, and this is how much we're hoping to get in the future, I think it's a good thing to let the public know.
So what I sent to both of you the other day.
Yes.
Is that, you just want me to expand upon it with what we've received? That was the only thing.
What I would do is I would do 2 simplified spreadsheets. One that we've received and one that's pending, and the dollars and the column that says, I was actually gonna do it, but I didn't get time to do it. You know, the match was this requires a match, yes, check the box. You know, it does something. This is good, I think we need this.
Yeah.
And I think it should be distributed amongst council just so that they are aware of all of them, because it does define it, but maybe something a little simpler.
Okay.
I just
Printed it out, I have another copy.
I just think that the residents have a right to know, and unless they're watching it on film that we don't have here now, except for Mr. Jadig's film, you know, they're not gonna know. Keep that back.
That was from the last meeting where we couldn't remember.
Remember, we were talking about, we didn't know what we were talking about, we started confused what grants we're talking about at this point.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Anybody else have anything for the group? I'm sorry. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Bill.
So you know I'm working to put them on YouTube. It takes.
Well, the problem is you can put them on YouTube all you want, someone's gotta watch it.
No, I agree. It's just I need a home for them.